for the next peak, now that we've been measuring ourselves and getting the personal data, it's sometimes good to have viewpoint from another angle as well, and get the viewpoint from the researcher's side of the table. And we're honored to have a research professor from National Consumer Research Center here talking about the topic. So please welcome Mika Pantzar.
My theme is related to several studies we have made in National Consumer Research Center. And I'm working with Minna Rückenstein, who is anthropologist, and Minna and me, we have these 3 articles we have prepared. This is our way of, it's not making a presentation or sharing presentation, but we are sharing these articles, and these 3 articles which are there. One is about the history of heart rate measurement, and how it's going to enlarge its perspectives. One is about, we had a kind of testing with human subjects. These 40 people follow for a 2 weeks period what's happening in their stress level, and then the third is about kind of history of quantified self, and we read carefully what was the story about this history in Wired. And I'm going to go very fast through some of our results, and I hope you can interrupt me if there's I'm too fast. But this is kind of what we are interested about. We are interested about this kind of historical developments, how it's possible that some measurement devices which are related to heart rate, electrocardiograph, have moved from this hospital use to sport activities, and nowadays in all kinds of coaching, whether it is stress or anything else. And this is sort of general theme we are interested about. I'm first telling about one special study we made about this heart rate variability measurement, and this is a picture from one Palo Alto Quantified Self meeting, and the lady said that the most interesting thing there was this heart rate variability, and it is a fascinating subject. And we had a study with Firstbeat. Firstbeat is a Finnish company which has been some 5 years in market, and it's a kind of strange combination of very different disciplines. It's stress psychology, sport physiology, and signal processing. And we had, in our use, we had possibility to follow this heart rate variability for 40% for 10 days, and we have all kinds of graphs like this. But we were not interested about individuals. We were interested about social rhythms. We were interested, is it possible to aggregate this data into kind of more general picture? And we had this kind of all kinds of other devices also in our experiment. We used also Vivago. We have GPS. We have all kinds of other measurement devices in our test, but I'm not now telling only about this heart rate variability, and this is the kind of people we had in our study. And as a social scientist, we were mainly interested about these 2 rhythmic patterns, these sociotemporal rhythms, which is mainly weekly rhythms, and then biotemporal rhythms, which are then mainly 24-hour rhythms in our study. And these are findings we get from our study. Here is the stress level for 24 hours. This is aggregate level for this 10 or 14 days period and 24 hours. And you can see that there is some kind of peaks in stress level. These peaks in our study, they were mainly about 8 o'clock in the morning, then it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the most stressful time in our test subject was 8 o'clock in the evening. And it was also quite interesting that the biggest deviation in stress level were in the 4 o'clock in the night time, and this is sort of called in Finnish sudenhetki, which is all kinds of suicides are taking place and things like that. And it was also very, we could expect that recovery, it is mainly happening in the night time, and here is this recovery rates for 24 hours. But one thing, our test subjects were a bit surprised how big effect alcohol had in their nights, and especially in the weekends. These kind of figures were a bit different. We also had checked different background variables. We studied different ages, body mass index, activity, how active these people are, and what is the difference between men and women in stress level. And you can see in this 24 hours that the main difference was between those active, physically active people and people who are not so active. It is this picture here, which actually showed to our surprise that when physically active people go to work, their stress level is going down. This is not true for those people who are not so active physically. Our anthropologist was not very happy about this result, because it leads very easily kind of in Finnish terveysterrori, which is sort of health terrorism, that now everybody should be active in their life and these physical activities. Also, we studied different day patterns, and this is not very easy to see what are the differences, but here you can see that different days were a bit different in these stress patterns. And the most interesting pattern was definitely this is Saturday here, where this pattern is very different compared to other weekdays. And here we have, you cannot see very clearly, but we compare this Saturday, Sunday, and then other days, and what were the stress patterns in these days. And for some reason, Saturday profile for men was very, very strange. This was the highest level of the stress of a whole week. It was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we do not know why it is so. What's the kind of reason? It was not so clear for women. So we were also a bit surprised to find out that our heart and our mouth speak a bit different language. There was some kind of situation where our heart was very stressful position, but our mouth, or we in interviews, people did not recognize that they are stressed. For instance, we find out that there was experienced stress which was not measured in our heart. It was typically work. We are so much in kind of culturally, we know that work is terrible, but our test subjects, their heart did not know that work is hard or terrible. So this kind of controversies we are working on. We have also other kinds of, but I don't have time to go through these. So this was a kind of a story about using these new tools for research purposes. I doubt whether there's any place other than in Finland so good opportunities to use this as a research tool. But we were not very conventional, because we made these aggregate figures, and we did have some kind of different measurement patterns, but I'm not telling them anymore. Now with Minna Rückenstein, we also were interested what is this kind of history of quantified self, and our starting point was the Wired one article in which this Kevin Kelly and other editors told that it was 2 years ago. My fellow Wired writer Kevin Kelly and I noticed that many of our acquaintances were beginning to do this terrible thing to themselves, finding clever ways to extract streams of numbers from ordinary human activities. A new culture of personal data was taking shape. With new tracking system popping up almost daily, we decided to create a website to track them. We called our project the Quantified Self. We don't have a slogan, but if we did, it would probably be self-knowledge through number. As Teemu said, this is quite recent phenomenon, and I think that Wired magazine has been very active in making this meme. In our study, we were thinking with Minna Rückenstein that is it possible to see similar kind of developments as happened in the beginning of 20th century when calculated self emerged. It meant that market economy would not be possible without this kind of subjects who are calculating all the time about their financial situation and prices, all these things. And then we sort of speculated whether now we are seeing a new time where this calculated self is now focusing also on health, and what does it mean for the future. We looked through several Wired articles. You cannot see these. There's actually 43 articles which were focusing very much on this quantified self, and we then read carefully all these articles, and we find out that they in Wired magazine they said that they have very purposefully made other memes like netizens, the long boom, the new economy, the long tail, crowdsourcing, and this kind of Wired memes. Quantified self belongs to this kind of long list of these memes, and for instance Wired has been active in discussing about network effect. Nowadays Wired is very active in discussing about do-it-yourself culture, and Chris Anderson's latest book, The New Industrial Revolution, tells about 3D printers and things like that. And one thing which is very obvious in reading Wired, it is very masculine culture, and all these articles were mainly written by men. I did not see any articles written by females, and it is sort of interesting that in these groups, I think almost half of you are females here, but in this kind of Californian dream, this is kind of men conquering the world. There was one thing which we find interesting in these many texts, that they discuss about the possibility of paradigm shift, and we then went back to the philosophy of science and Thomas Kuhn, who introduced originally the term paradigm, and the important thing with Thomas Kuhn was that within a new paradigm, all terms, concepts, and experiments fall into new relationships, one with the other. And we tried to sort of understand what kind of matrix, we call it disciplinary matrix. What are the roots of this quantified self movement? And we found out that there is 4 different themes which are coming from the history. One is transparency. Transparency is mainly nowadays discussed in terms of Google, how Google is a window for the world. Optimization and feedback loops, they are typically kind of concepts coming from economics and system science, cybernetics. And then finally, we found out that biohacking, which was the kind of fourth concept, it's a bit different. So we found out that there is many controversial issues. We then analyzed these different theories of knowledge, symbolic generalizations, shared goals, and related actions. I'm not going into details, but just briefly telling what these different concepts with these quotes. In Wired articles, there was one article which suggested that with genetic gadgets you can get a DNA sequence, you can get biosensors that record nearly every physiological metric from blood pressure to brain waves. You can get a digital scan of any part of the body. These tools offer a window into each person's that was unfathomable a few years ago. I think that window is important term here. And it was very, very often, Google was kind of example in this there was a kind of quote again. What we learned from companies like Google is that if you can collect enough data, there is no need for a grand theory to explain phenomena. So this is really radical thought that it is no more important to know causalities. It's enough if you have correlations. And this is what this kind of Google ideas were coming from. Optimizing, it's coming from the longer history, and it's actually this idea about neoclassical economics. It is about optimized behavior, and this kind of optimization, it is the main idea is that data-driven health revolution promised to make us all better, faster, and stronger. And important thing is that this is for health experts. It's it's when you are optimizing, that there is no more, as health experts are interested about normal, some kind of normal targets, but optimizing is something more, and this is that optimal, just not normal. Health is a variable, not a constant. This is really radical thought. And of course, there's all kinds of stories about supercharge your brain and all these things. Feedback loop is very interesting because it's coming from the 1940s, 1950s system science, where this idea about feedback loop was at that time very influential, and by this term feedback loop we are going back to scientific management. For instance, Winslow Taylor, who measured all kinds of activity patterns in a work, and they try to optimize work patterns, and so there is interesting relationship with this. And we found out that the biohacking or self-experimenting, it's very different compared to these three other aspects, and Tim Ferriss is definitely the most famous guy in this Wired discourse, and Tim Ferriss told in an article that the cocktail I began experimenting was ephedrine plus caffeine plus aspirin. Basically, you are hitting the accelerator. The process of getting off the stimulant is horrible. I'm more cautious now. And then it was that after much diligent field work, Ferriss hit on a technique capable of producing orgasm lasting up to 15 minutes. He said it's effective more than 95% of the time. This is the kind of self-experimenting which is quite wild, I think. Now I'm sort of putting these things together. We try to put in maybe a bit to academic discourse that these kind of preliminary conclusions. First, the disciplinary matrix of the Wired self demonstrates that QS movement is a peculiar mix of theories of knowledge ranging from behavioral economics, engineering, sports, and data analysis. The discourse is individualistic, eclectic, curiosity-driven, and internally conflicted, in addition to being closely intertwined with the aims of the technology market. Without technological devices, people would not be able to learn, develop, or reflect. It is not other people, but the smartphone applications, monitoring devices, and sensors that act as mediators and co-producers of knowledge in the era of dataism. Actually, our research interest nowadays is social life of data. We think that data is the important kind of glue in the society, and when people are making these quantified self experiments, the data is kind of glue which puts these measurement devices and individuals together, and this is quite interesting that if we think in terms of the old-fashioned idea of Dadaism, it was sort of attacking this kind of traditional modern concept of beauty. It challenged established canons of art, thought, and morality through nihilistic work and outrageous behavior. In a way, we see that this dataism is kind of ultimate expression of modernism. It's kind of very much opposite to this Dadaism. And for me, as a kind of researcher, I have some critical questions about this quantified self. How realistic these ideas about that everybody's are curious about their life, or how realistic is that they are trying to find a utility kind of driven things. And I'm actually ending my presentation with these kind of aspects, whether we should think these measurement devices, measurement utility-driven or curiosity-driven, whether instrumental reasoning is important, or is it more about self-expression, expressive reasoning, whether man is domesticating or technology is finally domesticating man. Thank you.